Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, Councilmember Kendra Brooks will join us to discuss the recently passed Power Act. Lance Haber will tell us more about SEPTA, and Denise, Vanessa Maria Graber will be here to tell us about the budget bill that is going through Washington right now. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. We are in studio together for the first time in maybe 5 years.
Well, I think this is the first time we've all been together, period. I mean, in the same room.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the first time I've been joining the two of you here.
Yeah.
It is great to be here, though.
Yeah. So Lance Haver is here. I'm here. We got Denise here. Denise Clay-Murray. Well, because Vanessa's not here.
Right.
So I was trying to. Yeah.
So basically, you have 3/4 of Hall Monitor.
Yeah, but Vanessa will be on the show later.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is get started with our interview with Councilmember Kendra Brooks. We discussed the Power Act, some budget talk, and where we are, or where she thinks we're with this home initiative. So here is our interview with Councilmember Kendra Brooks. All right, Councilmember Brooks, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you passed a significant piece of legislation last week, the Power Act. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So the Power Act is set to support over 750,000 workers here in Philadelphia who are not protected by a union or who rely on our city's Office of Worker Protections to enforce their labor rights. These folks include domestic workers, which are primarily women of color, as well as restaurant and temp workers who are also mostly people of color. And these workers are the most likely to experience wage theft and other violations that go against their rights as workers. So I'm really excited about this. As a former domestic worker, I can tell you about the labor violations that are really common, and people don't report them. And a lot of times, since they go unreported because people are afraid of retaliation by their boss, a lot of working folks end up losing money. So that's why we created this Power Act. We wanted to make sure that the labor laws could be enforced and that workers can count on us to have their backs when these violations occur. So I'm really excited about being able to move this forward and set an example of, how workers can create power and what workers' rights look like for the nation. Like, this is one of the strongest piece of legislation to support non-union workers that I know of.
And what are some of those violations that we typically see?
Wage theft, retaliation are the two major ones that we see. Those are the two strongest ones that we usually see.
So how can people use this legislation now? Is there a reporting mechanism? How do they let people know this is happening?
So, number one, we'll continue to advertise and push this information out throughout our networks. But the goal is that, so if a worker is discriminated, experiences wage theft, or reports retaliation, they have the ability to make a claim or report it to the Department of Worker Protections, and then they'll be assigned someone to carry out their case all the way through. So it gives workers the support they need to get past, anti-retaliation or wage theft, and they have the protection of the city to help carry out the investigation forward.
This is huge because we've been hearing, you always hear about these kinds of violations, and a lot of people are afraid to even say anything about it. So having this added protection, I think is, or not added, but just protection in general, I think is crucial for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So one thing I just want to add, I want to make sure that one of the things that we are really excited about is the direct compensation for the workers whose rights have been violated. In the past, that wasn't how it worked. The money would just go into I'm not really sure where the money went, but I know now that with this, the compensation goes directly to the employee. So if an employer is found in violation, the worker will be directly compensated, which is huge. A lot of times, folks just miss out on the money that's owed to them.
Yeah, yeah. So we're almost in June now, which I really can't believe, which means we're almost at the end of the spring session, which means we're almost have the budget wrapped up. What are some of the budget priorities that you're championing this budget season?
Well, of course, we're at $3.5 million to go into the Office of Worker Protections to be sure that the series of legislations that we've been pushing since we've been here are able to be enforced. So that's one of our biggest asks that we have across the board, I think, right now with the budget.
And you did cut out a little bit. Can you tell us what that 3.5 million is for?
For the Office of Worker Protection to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that these laws that we put in place are able to be carried forward.
Okay. Now, I want to peel the curtain back just a little bit so people maybe understand this a little clearer. When we're talking about budget, I think people think it's giant, amorphous kind of thing, but a lot of preparation goes into it. How do you get ready for budget season?
I mean, I think we think about offices that we've been in contact with throughout the city, and the deficits that we see happening, whether people aren't unable to um, receive services, if there is a shortage of staff, or there's been an increase in services that need to be provided. Then we try to encourage that the funding goes to specific things. Some parts of the budget are pretty stable. So like some departments will get a set amount of money regardless. But usually when we think about which offices may need more money, is really based on capacity or to increase capacity based on what's happening in the world. And for us, with the crumbling of the federal labor services, it's important that we protect workers here in Philadelphia by making sure our Office of Worker Protection is fully staffed and able to support workers here in Philadelphia.
Um, and what are we also hear the term budget negotiations a lot. What actually happens in a budget negotiation? How does that work?
Well, the mayor sets out her proposed budget for the year, which has already happened. And then council gets the opportunity to weigh in on areas whether we agree that with the mayor's proposed budget, or areas where we feel that it's either too much money or too less money, to make sure that we're all aligned. And then happens across all 17 offices of council, and then we vote on it. And then
And
the
is it
vote determines if people feel comfortable with where the negotiations land. I think in the past, I think I only voted no on one budget, which was my first budget, and it
right?
was because a huge increase in the police budget, which I did not agree with.
Right. So when it comes to the negotiations themselves, is it council negotiating with one another in order to have more of a united front, or individually with the mayor's office for their specific priorities?
No, council comes with a united plan that weighs out with council leadership and the mayor.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's interesting because sometimes people don't know exactly how that works. So I'm glad you're able to shed a little light on that for us. It's interesting to hear about it.
Yeah, like I think it gets our first time. It's a weird process, but we realize, we come together as a collective body and make a collective decision on this is something that we can agree upon. And like I said, I think I only voted no on one budget is because of police budget.
So earlier this year, the mayor announced the home initiative, $800 million dollars in borrowing, the biggest amount of money I think we've ever seen for almost anything in the city. Do you think that plan will be finished before the end of this term and voted on during this
Well,
term
well, it has to be the plan or the allocation, the budget allocation.
itself?
Well, I think I think one of the things we'll see is how much of the 800 million will actually get allotted towards the home initiative. I think the next step is making sure that the plan that's in place is able to be carried out over the next, what, 2.5 years, I think we're at now, until the end of our term. So I don't know. I think it depends on, it's a lot of different things for me to say whether it's going to be carried out or not. But there are some really good things that are in the home initiative that probably will be completed by the end of the first term, but some items we'll see.
Just in your opinion, what are some of the most important things in that plan that you really hope don't get changed, or there's more money provided to it?
I think the most important thing is that we already had a housing crisis. We need to make sure that we have more affordable housing in the city in general. And I think those are the things that we are in support of as a council. Now, timelines to get it completed, that's a whole nother conversation. But I definitely agree that we need more accessible, affordable housing throughout the city. And we also need to make sure that it's available to folks across affordable, what affordable means. So both low income as well as workforce housing. And I think I see some good stuff in the mayor's budget that can get us close to where we need to be. So I'm hopeful that we'll come to an agreement that we can satisfy mainly our housing crisis or get close to uh, moving forward and making sure we have enough housing here in the city to meet the needs.
Okay. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor. You're muted there, Denise.
Hi, council member. How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I guess my question for you is, you're in the minority part, and for most of the time that I've been covering city council, for the minority to get anything passed, especially something as major as the Power Act, doesn't happen a whole lot. Take us through a little bit of the process that got it from your desk to Mayor Parker's desk.
Well, I'm going to start with I'm an organizer first. So, coming into council, I came in with the lens of an organizer. So we worked with a coalition of folks, um, Black and Brown Workers Project, National Domestic Workers Alliance, El Comente, a bunch of different organizations that did did their diligence. They went and lobbied my colleagues around this issue. And, this is a piece of legislation where the process started way before I was in council. So just to be clear, when Bill Greenlee was in office, Councilmember Keonis Sanchez was in office, they had started moving on some of this around the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. And I remember sitting in there as an organizer having these conversations. So this has been an ongoing thing, and we've been able to build upon things that already happened. And I think the key step was that they were able to have AFL-CIO also join in on this, which means that the legislation that we're moving forward wasn't just for domestic workers. We were able to bring in so many other types of workers to get us to the 750,000 workers that will be impacted by this. And that is, that's organizing 101. How can you build a coalition to move something forward? Secondly, we had the hard conversations with different folks. We met with the business lobbyists, we met with the Chamber of Commerce, we met with the admin, we met with the Department of Labor. We did all our due diligence to get to this point. And we took in some amendments, making sure that the legislation was fair to everyone that was involved. And one of the things I want to applaud my staff and the legislative team that worked on this, a lot of what we did was streamline existing legislation to make it easier for our Department of Labor Protections to be able to enforce. So we took in consideration the state guidelines and the city guidelines and the federal guidelines and streamlined the process to make it much easier.
Now, you
So
said
we put a lot of work into this.
obviously. Now, you said that this is basically streamlining a whole bunch of processes. I guess, how about how people can access this? Will that be streamlined as well? Because you're dealing with people who don't necessarily speak governmentese who might need these services.
Yep, that's why it's through the Department of Labor and Protections. You don't have to get an attorney. You don't have to reach out to outside sources. You can report and file a claim directly with the Office of Labor Protections, and they will take you all the way through the process.
Okay, now, you, but as you said before, the money that people were getting compensated with for wage theft and different things wasn't necessarily going to the people themselves, and you didn't know where it was going. Has anyone asked where it was going? And if
I
so, is
just don't
that
recall.
something?
I just don't
Okay,
recall, and I don't want to give out misinformation.
okay, well, that's good.
That's to be honest. I just can't recall exactly where the money was going, but it wasn't going directly into the pockets of workers. So our goal is to make sure that workers are compensated for lost wages, or any damages because of retaliation or lost wages, because they were the ones impacted and they were the ones should receive the compensation. And that was what we wanted to streamline.
Okay, now, when you talk about wage theft, not everybody might, people might not know exactly what that is. Can you tell us what wage theft is?
Sure. So you could work 7 hours and your boss determines just because you said something that they didn't like that they're only going to pay you 5. That's wage theft. You worked 7 hours, so you should be paid for 7 hours. And those are the things that people a lot of times just let go. That's one version of wage theft. Or you work a certain amount of hours and it's just some kind of way deducted from some odd reason. You're denied breaks and lunch. It's a lot of different things that are happening to get, what that falls into the category of wage theft. But the most common is like you worked your hours and your boss decides that they're not going to pay you for your hours worked after you already worked the time.
Now, we were talking a little bit about housing and the housing crisis and the fact that Philadelphia doesn't have enough affordable housing for either worker, like working class level housing, or just plain old pop people, housing for people in poverty. One of the reasons that I've learned why this is because no one can agree on what affordable housing is in Philadelphia. No one can agree with what we mean when we say affordable housing. When you think affordable housing, what does that mean to you? What is affordable housing in your mind?
Affordable housing, based on the guidelines, is 30% of your income.
Mhm.
30%. Above that is not affordable for most people. And that could vary based on your income. So if the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, a lot of folks are living way beyond what it means to be uh, way below the guidelines of what 30% of their income and market rent in our city. So when we did our calculations, a lot of folks aren't able to afford, more than about, I think, $800 to $900 a month, but the average rents are way into the thousands now, way into the thousands. And that's where we're trying to find affordability. And I know affordable housing range, they start talking about annual median income. And the annual median income for Philadelphia isn't based on Philadelphia, it's based on the Philadelphia region. So if we base it on AMI, we have to take it a little lower because it's based on the region, and we have some wealthy areas that are within our region, which raises the AMI. And I think we need to take in consideration low income. And I like to say workforce housing, because workforce housing gives you a varied uh, opinion on what that looks like. So it could be for uh, our sanitation department all the way through educator, because it's all workforce. Like we're talking about what is affordable for the average worker here in Philadelphia. And keep in mind, if our minimum wage is $7.25 and our average medium income is set on that of the region, which includes Montgomery County, Bucks County, and Chester County, the level is already going in high for some of the average worker here in Philadelphia. So we need to focus on affordability for working class people. And I think folks, I agree with you, get caught up in what affordable housing is, and they have these extremely high numbers that the average Philadelphian cannot afford. And that's what I'm hoping, when we start building more housing, is making it more affordable, for more people here in our city. Or we're going to continue to be in this rut that we're in currently with our homelessness crisis going out of control.
Okay, I have one last question. Um, you talked about how council goes in as a united front when it comes to negotiating the budget with the mayor's office. But how do you all get there? Is it is it like a large set of negotiations? Does everybody bring what they want to the table and say, hey, let's all throw this in the pot and see what happens? And as the minority party, how often do you get what you want for your constituents?
I put in my suggestions. I put in what our targeted number is. Sometimes we have other colleagues that are aligned with our budget requests. And oftentimes we get close to what we want, because it's not like, as a minority party, it's not like we're requesting things that aren't for the majority of Philadelphians. So keep in mind, as being a member of the majority party, me and Councilmember O'Rourke are both organizers. So it's our job to make sure that the things that we deem as necessary in a budget are aligned with that of some of our colleagues, to get as many folks to buy in on the process. So when a negotiation happens, we have more folks that are asking for the same things that we're asking for. And that's how we get to the end. It has nothing to do with the minority party or the majority party. We focus on protecting the majority of Philadelphians, and a lot of times, people would like to put this division between the two. And the reality is, both myself and Councilmember O'Rourke, we're focusing on the majority of Philadelphians, and legislation, whether it's around budget, or legislation we're trying to move, we're focusing on making it good for the majority of Philadelphians. So it's our responsibility to get buy-in from our colleagues, regardless of political affiliation, to make sure that the majority of Philadelphians get what they need out of this budget and out of the laws that we're putting into place. So I like literally, that's not how Nick and I see it. We see it as, how can we get our just due for the majority of our constituents in this city? And that's what we work towards, that goal, regardless of party affiliation.
So it sounds to me like if you want to be a really successful council person, whether you're in the majority, in the minority, or somewhere in between, it helps to have been a community organizer first.
Well, I can't say that. We have other colleagues that aren't community organizers that, are pretty good legislators. I'm just saying what worked for me, not coming out of government, is that I'm a good organizer. And I'm okay. And also with Nick, we're good organizers. And our goal is to get what's best for the majority of Philadelphians. And we use our skills that we came into office with to get us to the finish line.
Well, thank you so much for your time, council member. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to
thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to give you back to Lawrence McGlynn, and you are listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right, thank you, Denise. And before we go, I just want to mention that council member, your intrepid communications director, Kathleen Melville, just told us that money that we weren't sure about, it went to the general fund.
Okay.
That's where all that money went. Makes no sense. So,
well, we fixed that now. So there you go. That's right. Back to my point. We're working for what's right for the majority of Philadelphians.
That's right. That's right. Well, council member, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us, and congratulations on passing a very important piece of legislation.
Thank you so much for having me once again, and have a
All
great
right.
day.
You too. Thank you so much. All right, we would like to thank Councilmember Kendra Brooks for joining us on the program this evening. And now we'd like to bring on Vanessa Maria Graber. Vanessa, are you there?
Hello.
Hey, Vanessa.
How are you tonight?
I'm good. I just wanted to shout out our WPPM fund drive. So for folks who are just tuning in, WPPM is in the middle of our annual fund drive. And here at the Hall Monitor, we've been broadcasting since the very beginning, since 2016. And so folks want to continue to support this type of programming, interviews with our elected officials, news about what's happening with our local government, hearing from voices in the community. You can go to wppm.phillycam.org and make a donation, and you can pledge for the Philadelphia Hall Monitor. So I just want to make sure our listeners and viewers got the memo, since Hall Monitor is one of the flagship news shows of WPPM.
All right. So Vanessa, what do you took a look at the federal budget bill that's going through Congress right now. What have you found out about this, and where do we stand on it right now?
Well, there's more than 1,000 pages of the budget bill. Admittedly, I did not read all 1,000 pages. It's a lot to sift through. I did do a lot of research. I looked into many different summaries of the bill, like lots of other news articles. I had listened to some of our elected officials, including Congressman Brendan Boyle, who's our Philadelphia U.S. congressperson, make statements about what was in the bill. I also used some AI data gathering to get the highlights. And so there is a lot in there. And admittedly, I came across some news stories about congresspeople that didn't even read the entirety of the bill. So the devil is in the details, right? There is a lot of information in there. And so I'm here to try to cover some of the highlights of the bill. One of the things is that it's called a big, beautiful bill. After reading about it, learning what's in there, I don't think it's so beautiful. I think it's actually pretty ugly. And there are some historic cuts in there. And so I think it's important, we don't cover federal government news all the time here, except when it's something big. And I think this bill is a pretty big deal.
Well, when you say it's got some pretty historic cuts, what are some of the... I keep hearing about Medicaid and Medicare being on the chopping block, but what other cuts should particularly Philadelphians be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, there's huge cuts to Medicaid, to SNAP benefits or food stamps. There are big changes to the student loan program and the repayment program and Pell Grants. And there is a lot of money for border control, border security, and defense. So let's dive in. I actually have a presentation where I break this all down. And here's a picture of Mike Johnson doing a press conference. And yeah, I think it's pretty ugly. And so I'm inspired by Lance Haver's presentations. And maybe, Lance, if you're on standby to break some of this tax stuff down, it was pretty dense. Admittedly, I didn't understand all of it. I did try to understand the most important things. So let's take a look. So this is a draft bill for tax cuts, spending cuts, and beefed up border security. It was recently passed by the House of Representatives, and now it goes to the Senate. And so it's not a budget bill. That's a separate thing. The Congress is going through a separate process for that. And so this is not a bill that funds the departments of government. And so here's a statement by Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff. And again, I got this information from the White House memo. And he says the big, beautiful bill is not an annual budget bill and does not fund departments of government. It does not finance our agencies or federal programs. Instead, it includes single largest welfare reform in American history, along with the largest tax cut and reform in American history. It's the most aggressive energy exploration in American history and the strongest border bill in American history, all while reducing the deficit. So there's a lot of hyperbole in there. These cuts by some are described as draconian.
Well, and I don't mean to cut you off, Vanessa, but I just want to mention this really quick because it drives me insane. When they talk about how it doesn't add to the deficit, the reason they say that is because they changed the way they do the accounting. So it used to be whatever the number is, that's the number. And now they don't do it that way anymore. And they just started it now specifically for this budget.
That's correct. There is a varying narratives around how these calculations are made. And so, yeah, I mean, there were other calculations made about tariffs that we later found out were probably derived from ChatGPT. So who knows where this came from? But yes, that is in dispute. So first we'll get into the quote unquote tax cuts, and I'm going to go pretty fast. But one of the biggest things is there's a permanent extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which is set to expire at the end of this year. There's a temporary boost in the standard deduction, which is a $1,000 increase for individuals, bringing it to $16,000 for individual filers and a $2,000 boost for joint filers, bringing it to $32,000. That reduces the amount of income that is actually subject to income tax. It temporarily raises the child tax credit from $2,000 to $500 through 2028. Then it returns back to $2,000 and will increase to account for inflation. Not everything in here is bad. That's one thing I thought everything was going to be horrible. There are some good things in here. But again, I'm not sure they outweigh some of the bad things. It permanently increases the small business deduction from 20% to 23%. It raises the estate tax exemption to $15 million. It's currently $13.6 million. This higher exemption would be permanently extended and adjusted for inflation going forward. It eliminates a longstanding $200 tax on gun silencers, which I thought was interesting. And that law has been on the books since Congress passed the National Firearms Act in 1934. The package also includes a tax on remittances. So this is when people are sending money to other countries. It would impose a 3.5 excise tax on cash payments. The bill would also extend the current higher standard deduction, adding a temporary boost for several years. It would eliminate clean energy tax breaks, and that's for electric vehicle tax credits, electric vehicle chargers, solar, etc. It would eliminate federal taxes on tips and overtime pay, which is interesting and definitely something that is controversial in some places. It wouldn't repeal taxes on Social Security benefits. It increases the SALT cap to $40,000 for incomes up to $500,000, with the cap phasing downward for those higher incomes. I know that is controversial as well. Small businesses, including partnerships and S corporations, will be able to deduct 23% of their qualified business income from their taxes, and the deduction has been 20%. No taxes on overtime through 2028, which I think some people might like, and tax deductions on up to $10,000 in interest on auto loans for cars assembled in the United States until 2029.
And just before you go on to changes to Medicaid, what people need to understand about the no tax on tips thing is that's only if your tip is in cash. If it's on a credit card, you still get taxed for it.
It also is limited to certain industries, like people in the restaurant industry, people that work in beauty or aesthetics, but there are a lot of industries that you might receive tips and you won't qualify for that. Let's dive into Medicaid, the really big thing. $700 billion in cuts to Medicaid. There are researchers who estimate that this would kick anywhere from 13 to 14 million people off of health insurance. And so there's also new requirements to be eligible for Medicaid. There would be a new community engagement requirements of at least 80 hours per month of work, education, or service for able-bodied adults without dependents. So if you don't have any kids or people you're taking care of, supposedly will start in 2029. People would have to verify their eligibility for the program twice a year rather than just once, which is pretty crazy. There are some medical cannabis programs across the country that make people do this. And for example, if somebody has a chronic issue like fibromyalgia or multiple sclerosis or HIV, that's not going to change. So this requirement is, perceived by some as an undue burden. And it's just, again, if people don't do it, they will get kicked off the program. There are cuts, federal funds to states that use Medicaid infrastructure to provide healthcare coverage to undocumented immigrants. And it bans Medicaid from covering gender affirming services for children and adults. That is also a really big concern for people.
And let's face it, what Medicaid would pay, for Medicaid reimbursement, there is no way Medicaid could cover gender reassignment because it would be so far above what Medicaid pays for anything that whole part is just red meat to the base because there's really no sense in it.
Right.
Yeah, I think there are going to be entire hospital systems that collapse because the majority of their patients receive Medicaid funding. And there are places where people are not able to find work, especially in rural areas, that will not be able to meet this work requirement. So this is very, very concerning for a lot of people.
Well, and that's the thing. The work requirement doesn't make a lot of sense because I think it's over 91% of the people who receive this type of assistance are the working poor, the disabled, the elderly. What are we, who is getting it that shouldn't? Where are the numbers on that? And no one's shown me that, by the way. They tell me this is all about getting rid of fraud and abuse, but where is that?
It's also going to increase the amount of premiums and copays on the marketplace for people utilizing Obamacare. Yep. So even if you're kicked off Medicaid and you want to buy from the marketplace, it's going to be extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. So again, this is one of the main things, that people hear. But again, there's more in the bill. So let's jump.
Yes, I see $46.5 billion for this border wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for.
No, Mexico was never going to pay for it.
But he kept telling us it was.
Never going to happen. They never agreed to do that, to clarify. Mm-hmm. There's $4.1 billion to hire 3,000 new Border Patrol agents, as well as 5,000 new customs officers. $2.1 billion for signing and retention bonuses for Border Patrol agents. There's also funds for 10,000 more immigration and custom enforcement officers. So that's ICE. $1,000 fee for people who are filing for asylum in the U.S.
What?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you used to have to pay to file for asylum?
No, but it does follow other countries like Australia and Iran who charge people to ask for asylum. There is $12 billion for expenses related to border security, and there's plans to remove 1 million immigrants annually and house 100,000 people in detention centers. So if you're wondering why they are cutting social programs like Medicaid and food stamps, it's to be able to afford this kind of stuff and to be able to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans.
Did the 20 people from South Africa have to pay $1,000 when they came here for asylum?
Well, this bill has not been passed in the Senate, so that has not become law yet, and hopefully it will, maybe not. So let's move into defense. There's nearly $150 billion in new money for the Defense Department and national security. $25 billion for Trump's Golden Dome for America, a long-envisioned missile defense shield, similar to Israel's Iron Dome. $21 billion to restock the nation's ammunition arsenal, as if we don't have enough.
I was going to say, do we need that?
Who knows? 34 billion to expand the naval fleet and more shipbuilding. And I watched an interesting documentary. I believe it was either on 60 Minutes or PBS. It was on YouTube somewhere. I'm sorry, I don't know the name. But it's interesting because they were talking about the need to expand our naval fleet to compete with China's expansive naval fleet. And the people in the documentary who were, retired officers from the Navy said, this isn't about shipbuilding and jobs. This is about competing with China, which I found interesting when I was looking through this. $9 billion for service member quality of life related issues, including housing, healthcare, and special pay. Although you'll see in other budget bills, huge cuts to the VA. And we also know DOGE has, cut a big portion of VA benefits and personnel as well.
But see, that's the thing that drives me crazy when I see the defense bill, as somebody who was born on a military base and whose dad used to run a military hospital. That money goes everywhere but where it should, which is to the soldiers. You've got people who still haven't quite recovered from Afghanistan and Iraq that can't get the services they need. And you're spending money on a golden dome when we all know that gold is like a penetrable substance that missiles could get through if it's not strong enough.
Yeah, I mean, to a lot of people, these budget items don't make any sense. Makes it really, really difficult to justify when we talk about the huge amount of needs and the high number of veterans still committing suicide every day, which I believe is at about 22. So the other big issue of contention, student loans, which, as you know, millions of Americans are struggling to pay their student loans for all kinds of reasons. But this proposed bill will cut subsidized loans and plus loans. Plus loans are the loans that parents take out, and subsidized loans are that, when you take out loans, you don't have any interest on them while you're enrolled in school or you're on some kind of deferment program. So most people who are working class have subsidized loans. So to take them away, it's really, really going to make life difficult for people. Only full-time students are eligible for the maximum Pell Grant, and this would increase full-time status from 12 credit hours per semester to 15 credit hours. Now, on most campuses, that's 5 classes. And if you have a Pell Grant, you're probably working part-time or full-time. So increasing this to 15 credits, again, is going to add an additional workload to students who receive the Pell Grant, which is, I don't know, seems unnecessary to me. The bill also consolidates the many federal repayment programs into a single income-based repayment plan. So there are many, many options, a lot of help, and they're all going to be eliminated, and there's just going to be one federal repayment program.
Which is put together by a group of people that includes the only person ever in American business to have to file for bankruptcy running a casino.
3 times.
Correct. Food stamps. Again, this is also just very detrimental. It will reduce federal spending on SNAP by $267 billion over 10 years, resulting in the largest cut to the food assistance program in American history. It would require more SNAP recipients to work, just like in Medicaid, to maintain eligibility, and it will lower the age cap of which work requirements end from 64 to 54 years. Parents with school-age children as young as 7 must work to keep their benefits. Right now, if you have children under 18, you don't have to do that. So it's basically anybody. Kids who are school age are going to have to work to have food stamps. And doesn't matter if you have babies that you're taking care of and nursing. It's going to make you have to try to work. And it shifts more of the cost to states. They would have to run the program and provide food aid. And a lot of governors are pretty upset about this because they really, don't have room in their state budgets to be able to absorb these additional costs.
Now, one of my questions is, and that goes back to the electric vehicle tax credit being eliminated. Has the former head of Doge, Elon Musk, weighed in on this big old cut to some of his revenue?
Yeah, actually, Musk has been a critic of this bill, and he has said that it has undermined some of the savings that he's made through Doge cuts. You're also seeing him sort of move away from a lot of public events and interactions with Trump. So this might be a signal that they are parting ways. But there are members of Congress, and again, this went through the Ways and Means Committee first, and then it went to the full House of Representatives. And so there's definitely some people there who are not fans of his, and he has been very vocally critical of this bill.
Right. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for doing that deep dive for us. It's appalling.
It's going to the Senate right now.
Yeah.
So the bill is not law. And so if people have concerns or if they support the bill, either way, they can contact their U.S. senator and let them know what their feelings are about this historic piece of legislation. Before we go, I just have one update, and that's with the Eddie Irizarry murder case. Last week, I brought you a story about Mark Dial, the police officer who was on trial for Eddie Irizarry's murder. He was a young Puerto Rican man killed by Mark Dial, a police officer, back in July of 2023. That trial was last week. It was pretty short. At the end of the week, a verdict came out, but when we aired the show on Wednesday, they had not had a verdict yet. He was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. He was found not guilty of third-degree murder, the most serious charge. He was also found guilty of possessing an instrument of crime and recklessly endangering another person. And he was found not guilty of official oppression. His sentencing hearing is now scheduled for July 17th. And in addition to the criminal case, Eddie Irizarry's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Mark Dial and his partner, police officer Morris, and they are seeking at least $150,000 in civil damages. So we promised you we would bring you an update to that case. And there you have it. So we'll be following this through the sentencing. Now, one thing that is a bit troubling is I was looking into the sentencing requirements and past histories. What is the likelihood that he would get the maximum sentence, which is about 20 years. And I found a case from a few years ago, back in, I believe it was 2022, and it was former police officer Eric Rook, who is convicted of the same exact charge for killing an unarmed Black man named Dennis Plowden. And that officer was only sentenced to 11 and a half to 23 months in incarceration, and ordered him to be, and the judge ordered him to be eligible for re-entry. The DA's office was very upset about that ruling, and so the judge did not follow the minimum mandatory sentencing requirements. So if that gives you any indication of what we might see here, family might be disappointed. So we'll have to see if history repeats itself, or if the judge in this case will give a longer sentence. But we'll keep you posted.
All right, thank you so much, Vanessa. And now, Lance, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the water department.
So this is something that's different than what Vanessa was talking about. With the federal budget, the city council really can't control it. But the city of Philadelphia owns our water department. It's completely owned by the city, no private investors. There are bondholders, but the city pretty much can decide what it wants to do. And it has set up a process where there is a Philadelphia Water and Sewer Rate Board that sets the rates. The board is appointed by the mayor. There are 5 people: former water commissioner, former chief legal counsel of the gas works, 2 developers, and a consumer representative. The board appoints a public advocate. They call it a public advocate, but it has no relationship to the public, doesn't answer to the public. It's only answers to the rate board itself. So you have the mayor who puts a board together who has an advocate that answers to her appointees. The first thing to know is that the hearings, what are called technical hearings, were illegal. They decided, because they knew what they were going to do, they decided to get rid of the public by limiting the technical hearings to Zoom. If you weren't invited, you couldn't participate. You couldn't show up with a sign. You couldn't show up to object. You couldn't hand out a flyer. It was all done by Zoom. And that's a violation of the law. Governor Wolf signed a law called Act 15 in 2020 that allowed municipalities to have Zoom meetings while there was a state of emergency, COVID. Once that state of emergency was lifted, it was no longer legal for Zoom hearings to take the place of public meetings. And the water department had requested a large rate increase. They had asked for a total of $132.49 million over 2 years. That's how much they asked for. And here's the game they play. Everybody knows that the utilities never get every penny they ask for. Whether it's PGW, the Philadelphia Gas Works, or it's the electric company, or it's the water department, or it's the phone company, or it's any utility across the United States. Everybody knows they always ask for more than what they need because politically they can't be given every penny. It looks like no one's doing their job. So they asked for $132.49 million. Now what that is roughly a 20% rate increase. The
Wow.
advocate that's appointed by the rate board hires a consultant, and that consultant says up front, without any shame, without any mixed words, doesn't matter to the consultant how hard it is for the public to pay bills, doesn't matter what the public thinks. In fact, the consultant files his testimony before they hold the public hearings. So that consultant said all they need is $103 million. They don't need any more than that, $103 million. Then at the beginning of the technical hearings, this is a Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning, with nobody else allowed in, nobody participating. Now, just again, full disclosure, I file as a participant because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get this information. This information still isn't posted on the webpage. If you file a right to know, it takes 30 days. If you just file a question, they don't have to answer. So the only way I can get this information and have it available to our viewers and our listeners is by being a participant. So I'm on the Zoom meeting legally, 10 o'clock in the morning. The water department's lawyer and the rate board's lawyer walk in and say, we've reached a settlement, meaning they're not going to have any questions for any of the witnesses. All the consultants' work was pointless because nobody's going to ask anything about it. And they agreed that the water department should get 97% of what they asked for, $128.446 million. Again, I'm going to say it again, 97% of what they asked for. In terms of the history, that's outrageous. Almost never does a utility get that amount. The advocate's own consultant says that that's $25.44 million more than what the water department needs, 25% above what is necessary for the water department.
Well, the question I have is, what kind of negotiating are you actually doing if the person who you're negotiating with gets almost completely everything they want? That negotiation means that everybody walks out mad because they didn't get everything they wanted. And obviously on one side, 97%, I'll take that.
The answer is the majority leader, city council member, Catherine Gilmore Richardson, sent a letter saying the rate increase is too high, don't do it. The rate board's advocate wouldn't meet with her. They refused to meet with her and find out what her position was. In fact, they refused to meet with any of the registered community organizations, any advocate organizations, any neighborhood groups, any council person, any state representative, any state senator. They decided that the only people they had to answer to was the rate board, so they could do this. And they can do it because it happens in private. Nobody knows about it. There wasn't an article in the Inquirer. KYW didn't cover it. Unfortunately, we're the only people covering this, and this is such a fundamental issue because you can't live in a home in Philadelphia without water.
Yeah.
It's not a question of whether you would like to or not. City Health Department says if you don't have water, that house is inhabitable and you've got to move out. If you have kids, they can't live there. Now, you can live without heat. You can use a kerosene heater, and there's some questions whether you can live without electricity. You can use batteries or something else. But everyone agrees you can't live without water. And so the rate increase, just again, since the rate board was set up and hired the same person year after year after year, the rates have gone up from $69.31 a month in August of 2023. At the end of this rate increase, there'll be $93.78. That's how large the rate increase. And it's not needed. That's what's so upsetting. Let me give you a few examples and then I'll wind it up. The water department could combine services with the gas works. Most of us live in row homes. The meters are within 10 feet. Both the Philadelphia Gas Works and the Philadelphia Water Department are owned by the same people, the city of Philadelphia. There is a national buying cooperative that would lower the cost for the water department. The water department says it can't join it because it has to buy through the procurement department, the city's procurement. But they haven't asked council for permission to do that. The water department doesn't care if the company they do business with is local or not. Now, the significance of that is one of the largest costs for the water department is the fact that we have a very unequal distribution of wealth, and a lot of us can't pay these skyrocketing bills. So we need a low-income plan. If we had more living wage jobs, we wouldn't need that low-income plan, and the rates wouldn't have to go up. So they don't care about that, and they say it blatantly. It's not like they're trying to hide it. They say it doesn't matter. One of the real assets the city of Philadelphia has is we have plentiful water. If you think about the southeast or the southwest part of the nation where the water is in the aquifers and it gets drawn down, any industry that uses water is in trouble if you're in the southwest because you're going to run out of water. We have excess water. So you would think our water department would try and bring businesses that are water intensive into the city. They'd have no marketing program. They say PIDC, Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, is supposed to do the marketing for them. I asked for what information they gave PIDC, and they don't give them anything. So the problem is the system is in place. It is corrupt, not that someone's getting a kickback. It's corrupt in that the water department only hires consultants to try and raise rates, refuse to hire consultants to do what's called a management or operational audit that would save money. And nobody is paying attention. None of the city council people have been asked if they approved of this. The advocate refuses to talk with them, and they allow this to happen year after year after year.
This is one of the first things I think we ever talked about when we were started doing the show together, the three of us, and even before Vanessa was here, and it's never changed.
It will only change when council decides it's time.
Yeah.
When people call up their council person and say, I'm not complaining to the water department anymore, I'm complaining to you.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for being the
Yes,
one person
thank you.
who's paying attention to that. We will be back next week. Councilmember Jamie Gaudier will be with us to discuss more housing. So we'll be back next week on Hall Monitor.
Don't forget to donate to the WPPM Fund Drive.
That's right.